Japan. Nippon or Nihon is an island country in East Asia, located in the northwest Pacific Ocean. It is bordered on the west by the Sea of Japan, and extends from the Sea of Okhotsk in the north toward the East China Sea and Taiwan in the south. Part of the Ring of Fire, Japan spans an archipelago of 6,852 islands covering. The 5 main islands are Hokkaido, Honshu, Shikoku, Kyushu, and Okinawa. Tokyo is Japan's capital and largest city. Other major cities include Yokohama, Osaka, Nagoya, Sapporo, Fukuoka, Kobe, and Kyoto. Japan is the 11th most populous country in the world, as well as one of the most densely populated and urbanized. About 3/4 of the country's terrain is mountainous, concentrating its population of 126.2 million on narrow coastal plains. Japan is divided into 47 administrative prefectures and 8 traditional regions. The Greater Tokyo area is the most populous metropolitan area in the world, with more than 37.4 million residents. Japan has been inhabited since the Upper Paleolithic period 30,000 BC, though the first mentions of the archipelago appear in Chinese chronicles from the 1st century AD. Between the 4th and 9th centuries, the kingdoms of Japan became unified under an emperor and his imperial court based in Heian-kyo, beginning in the 12th century. However, political power was held by a series of military dictators, shogun and feudal lords daimyo, and enforced by a class of warrior nobility samurai. After a century-long period of civil war, the country was reunified in 1603 under the Tokugawa shogunate, which enacted an isolationist foreign policy. In 1854, a United States fleet forced Japan to open trade to the West, which led to the end of the shogunate and the restoration of imperial power in 1868. In the Meiji period, the Empire of Japan adopted a Western-styled constitution and pursued a program of industrialization and modernization. In 1937, Japan invaded China. In 1941, it entered World War II as an Axis power. After suffering defeat in the Pacific War and 2 atomic bombings, Japan surrendered in 1945 and came under a 7-year Allied occupation, during which it adopted a new constitution. Since 1947, Japan has maintained a unitary parliamentary constitutional monarchy with a bicameral legislature, the National Diet. Japan is a great power and a member of numerous international organizations, including the United Nations since 1956, the ECT, and the Group of Seven. Although it has renounced its right to declare war, the country maintains self-defense forces that are ranked as the world's 4th most powerful military. After World War II, Japan experienced high economic growth, becoming the 2nd largest economy in the world by 1990 before being surpassed by China in 2010. Despite stagnant growth since the lost decade, the country's economy remains the 3rd largest by nominal GDP and the 4th largest by PPP. A leader in the automotive and electronics industries, Japan has made significant contributions to science and technology. Ranked the 2nd highest country on the Human Development Index in Asia after Singapore, Japan has the world's 2nd highest life expectancy, though it is experiencing a decline in population. Culture of Japan is well known around the world, including its art, cuisine, music, and popular culture, which encompasses prominent animation and video game industries.
Etymology.
Hiragana equals katakana equals romaji equals Nippon koku Nihon koku. The name for Japan in Japanese is written using the kanji and pronounced Nippon or Nihon. Before it was adopted in the early 8th century, the country was known in China as Wa and in Japan by the Indonym Yamato. Nippon, the original Sino-Japanese reading of the characters, is favored today for official uses, including on banknotes and postage stamps. The name Japan is based on the Chinese pronunciation and was introduced to European languages through early trade. In the 13th century, Marco Polo recorded the early Mandarin or Wu Chinese pronunciation of the characters as Sipang-u. The Old Malay name for Japan, Japang or Japan, was borrowed from a southern coastal Chinese dialect and encountered by Portuguese traders in Southeast Asia, who brought the word to Europe in the early 16th century. The first version of the name in English appears in a book published in 1577, which spelled the name as Japan in a translation of a 1565 Portuguese letter.
History. Prehistoric to classical history.
A Paleolithic culture from around 30,000 BC constitutes the first known habitation of the islands of Japan. This was followed from around 14,500 BC, the start of the Jomon period, by a Mesolithic to Neolithic semi-sedentary hunter-gatherer culture characterized by pit-dwelling and rudimentary agriculture. Clay vessels from the period are among the oldest surviving examples of pottery. From around 1000 BC, Yayoi people began to enter the archipelago from Kyushu, intermingling with the Jomon. The Yayoi period saw the introduction of practices including wet rice farming, a new style of pottery, and metallurgy from China and Korea. According to legend, Emperor Jimmu, grandson of Amaterasu, founded a kingdom in central Japan in 660 BC, beginning a continuous imperial line. Japan first appears in written history in the Chinese Book of Han, completed in 111 AD. Buddhism was introduced to Japan from Bekka Korean Kingdom in 552, but the subsequent development of Japanese Buddhism was primarily influenced by China. Despite early resistance, Buddhism was promoted by the ruling class, including figures like Prince Shotoku, and gained widespread acceptance beginning in the Asuka period 592 to 710. The far-reaching Taka reforms in 645 nationalized all land in Japan, to be distributed equally among cultivators, and ordered the compilation of a household registry as the basis for a new system of taxation. These legal reforms created the Ritsuryo state, a system of Chinese-style centralized government that remained in place for half a millennium. The Nara period 710 to 784 marked an emergence of a Japanese state centered on the imperial court in Heokyo, modern Nara. The period is characterized by the appearance of a nascent literary culture with the completion of the Kojiki 712 and Nihon Shoki 720, as well as the development of Buddhist-inspired artwork and architecture. A smallpox epidemic in 735 to 737 is believed to have killed as much as one-third of Japan's population.
Feudal era.
Japan's feudal era was characterized by the emergence and dominance of a ruling class of warriors, the samurai. In 1185, following the defeat of the Taira clan in the Genpei War, Samurai Minamoto no Yoritomo established a military government at Kamakura. After Yoritomo's death, the Hojo clan came to power as regents for the shoguns. The Kamakura shogunate repelled Mongol invasions in 1274 and 1281 but was eventually overthrown by Emperor Go-Daigo. However, the succeeding Ashikaga shogunate failed to control the feudal warlords daimyos and a civil war began in 1467, opening the century-long Sengoku period warring states. During the 16th century, Portuguese traders and Jesuit missionaries reached Japan for the first time, initiating direct commercial and cultural exchange between Japan and the West. Oda Nobunaga used European technology and firearms to conquer many other daimyos. His consolidation of power began what was known as the Uchimonmoyama period. After the death of Nobunaga in 1582, his successor Toyotomi Hideyoshi unified the nation in the early 1590s and launched two unsuccessful invasions of Korea in 1592 and 1597. When open war broke out, Ieyasu defeated rival clans in the Battle of Sekigahara in 1600. He was appointed shogun by Emperor Go-Yozai in 1603 and established the Tokugawa shogunate at Edo, modern Tokyo. The shogunate enacted measures including Shahuto, as a code of conduct to control the autonomous daimyos, and in 1639 the isolationist Sakoku closed-country policy that spanned the 2.5 centuries of tenuous political unity known as the Edo period 1603 to 1868. The study of Western sciences Rangaku continued through contact with the Dutch enclave in Nagasaki.
Modern era.
In 1854, Commodore Matthew Perry and the black ships of the United States Navy forced the opening of Japan to the outside world with the Convention of Kanagawa, adopting Western political, judicial, and military institutions. The cabinet organized the Privy Council, introduced the Meiji Constitution, and assembled the Imperial Diet. During the Meiji era 1868 to 1912, the Empire of Japan emerged as the most developed nation in Asia and as an industrialized world power that pursued military conflict to expand its sphere of influence. After victories in the First Sino-Japanese War 1894–1895 and the Russo-Japanese War 1904–1905, Japan gained control of Taiwan, Korea and the southern half of Sakhalin. The early 20th century saw a period of Cho democracy 1912–1926 overshadowed by increasing expansionism and militarization. World War I allowed Japan, which joined the side of the victorious Allies, to capture German possessions in the Pacific and in China. This process accelerated during the 1930s, spawning a number of radical nationalist groups that shared a hostility to liberal democracy and a dedication to expansion in Asia. In 1931, Japan invaded and occupied Manchuria. Following international condemnation of the occupation, it resigned from the League of Nations 2 years later. In 1936, Japan signed the Anti-Comintern Pact with Nazi Germany. The 1940 Tripartite Pact made it one of the Axis powers. In 1940, the empire invaded French Indochina, after which the United States placed an oil embargo on Japan. On December 7–8, 1941, Japanese forces carried out surprise attacks on Pearl Harbor, as well as on British forces in Malaya, Singapore, and Hong Kong, among others, beginning World War II in the Pacific. Throughout areas occupied by Japan during the war, numerous abuses were committed against local inhabitants, with many forced into sexual slavery. After Allied victories during the next 4 years, which culminated in the Soviet invasion of Manchuria and the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in 1945, Japan agreed to an unconditional surrender. The war cost Japan its colonies and millions of lives. In 1947, Japan adopted a new constitution emphasizing liberal democratic practices. And Japan was granted membership in the United Nations in 1956. On March 11, 2011, Japan suffered one of the largest earthquakes in its recorded history, triggering the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster. On May 1, 2019, after the historic abdication of Emperor Akihito, his son Naruhito became the new emperor, beginning the Reiwa era.
Geography.
Japan comprises 6,852 islands extending along the Pacific coast of Asia. It stretches over northeast-southwest from the Sea of Okhotsk to the East China Sea. The country's 5 main islands, from north to south, are Hokkaido, Honshu, Shikoku, Kyushu and Okinawa. The Ryukyu Islands, which include Okinawa, are a chain to the south of Kyushu. The Nanpo Islands are south and east of the main islands of Japan. Together they are often known as the Japanese archipelago. Japan's territory is, because of its mountainous terrain, approximately 67% of Japan's land is uninhabitable. As a result, the habitable zones, mainly in coastal areas, have extremely high population densities. Japan is one of the most densely populated countries. Approximately 0.5% of Japan's total area is reclaimed land. Japan is substantially prone to earthquakes, tsunami and volcanoes because of its location along the Pacific Ring of Fire. It has the 17th highest natural disaster risk as measured in the 2016 World Risk Index. Japan has 111 active volcanoes. Destructive earthquakes, often resulting in tsunami, occur several times each century. The 1923 Tokyo earthquake killed over 140,000 people. More recent major quakes are the 1995 Great Hanshin earthquake and the 2011 Tohoku earthquake, which triggered a large tsunami. In the Sea of Japan region on Honshu's west coast, northwest winter winds bring heavy snowfall during winter. In the summer, the region sometimes experiences extremely hot temperatures because of the FN. The central highland has a typical inland humid continental climate, with large temperature differences between summer and winter. The mountains of the Chugoku and Shikoku regions shelter the Seto Inland Sea from seasonal winds, bringing mild weather year-round. The highest temperature ever measured in Japan was recorded on July 23, 2018, and repeated on August 17, 2020. The main rainy season begins in early May in Okinawa, and the rain front gradually moves north. In late summer and early autumn, typhoons often bring heavy rain. According to the Environment Ministry, heavy rainfall and increasing temperatures have caused several problems in the agricultural industry and elsewhere.
Biodiversity.
Japan has 9 forest ecoregions which reflect the climate and geography of the islands. They range from subtropical moist broadleaf forests in the Ryukyu and Bonin Islands, to temperate broadleaf and mixed forests in the mild climate regions of the main islands, to temperate coniferous forests in the cold, winter portions of the northern islands. Japan has over 90,000 species of wildlife, including the brown bear, the Japanese macaque, the Japanese raccoon dog, the small Japanese field mouse, and the Japanese giant salamander. A large network of national parks has been established to protect important areas of flora and fauna as well as 52 Ramsar wetland sites. 4 sites have been inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List for their outstanding natural value.
Environment.
In the period of rapid economic growth after World War II, environmental policies were downplayed by the government and industrial corporations. As a result, environmental pollution was widespread in the 1950s and 1960s. Responding to rising concern, the government introduced several environmental protection laws in 1970. The oil crisis in 1973 also encouraged the efficient use of energy because of Japan's lack of natural resources. More than 22 coal-fired power plants are planned for construction in Japan, following the switching off of Japan's nuclear fleet after the 2011 Fukushima nuclear disaster. Japan ranks 20th in the 2018 Environmental Performance Index, which measures a nation's commitment to environmental sustainability. Japan is the world's 5th largest emitter of carbon dioxide. In 2020, the government of Japan announced a target of carbon neutrality by 2050. Environmental issues include urban air pollution NOx, suspended particulate matter, and toxics, waste management, water eutrophication, nature conservation, climate change, chemical management and international cooperation for conservation.
Politics.
Japan is a unitary state and constitutional monarchy in which the power of the emperor is limited to a ceremonial role. Executive power is instead wielded by the Prime Minister of Japan and his cabinet, whose sovereignty is vested in the Japanese people. Naruhito is the Emperor of Japan, having succeeded his father Akihito upon his accession to the chrysanthemum throne in 2019. There is universal suffrage for adults over 18 years of age, with a secret ballot for all elected offices. Historically influenced by Chinese law, the Japanese legal system developed independently during the Edo period through texts such as Kujikato Asadamagaki. However, since the late 19th century, the judicial system has been largely based on the civil law of Europe, notably Germany. In 1896, Japan established a civil code based on the German Bürgerliches Gesetzbuch, which remains in effect with post-World War II modifications. The Constitution of Japan, adopted in 1947, is the oldest unamended constitution in the world. Statutory law originates in the legislature, and the constitution requires that the emperor promulgate legislation passed by the Diet without giving him the power to oppose legislation. The main body of Japanese statutory law is called the Six Codes.
Administrative divisions.
Japan is divided into 47 prefectures, each overseen by an elected governor and legislature. Japan is a member of the G7, APEC, and ASEAN Plus 3, and is a participant in the East Asia Summit. Japan signed a security pact with Australia in March 2007 and with India in October 2008. It is the world's fifth largest donor of official development assistance, donating $2 billion in 2014. In 2017, Japan had the fifth largest diplomatic network in the world. Japan has close economic and military relations with the United States, with which it maintains a security alliance. The United States is a major market for Japanese exports and a major source of Japanese imports, and is committed to defending the country, with military bases in Japan. Japan's relationship with South Korea had historically been strained because of Japan's treatment of Koreans during Japanese colonial rule, particularly over the issue of comfort women. In 2015, Japan agreed to settle the comfort women dispute with South Korea by issuing a formal apology and paying money to the surviving comfort women. The 1990s saw increased interest in Korean culture in Japan, particularly related to food, travel, and the World Cup. The spread of the Korean wave in the early 2000s, called the Hanru or Kanri wave in Japan, accelerated this trend, manifesting for example in a cult following for Korean television series Winter Sonata. Japan is engaged in several territorial disputes with its neighbors. Japan contests Russia's control of the Southern Kuril Islands, which were occupied by the Soviet Union in 1945. South Korea's control of the Liancourt Rocks is acknowledged but not accepted as they are claimed by Japan. Japan has strained relations with China and Taiwan over the Senkaku Islands and the status of Okinotorishima.
Military.
Japan is the second highest ranked Asian country in the Global Peace Index. Japan maintains one of the largest military budgets of any country in the world. The country's military, the Japan Self-Defense Forces, is restricted by Article 9 of the Japanese Constitution, which renounces Japan's right to declare war or use military force in international disputes. The military is governed by the Ministry of Defense, and primarily consists of the Japan Ground Self-Defense Force, the Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force, and the Japan Air Self-Defense Force. The deployment of troops to Iraq and Afghanistan marked the first overseas use of Japan's military since World War II. The government of Japan has been making changes to its security policy, which include the establishment of the National Security Council, the adoption of the National Security Strategy, and the development of the National Defense Program Guidelines. In May 2014, Prime Minister Shinzo Abe said Japan wanted to shed the passiveness it has maintained since the end of World War II and take more responsibility for regional security. Recent tensions, particularly with North Korea and China, have reignited the debate over the status of the JSDF and its relation to Japanese society.
Domestic law enforcement.
Domestic security in Japan is provided mainly by the prefectural police departments, under the oversight of the National Police Agency. As the central coordinating body for the prefectural police departments, the National Police Agency is administered by the National Public Safety Commission. The Special Assault Team comprises national-level counter-terrorism tactical units that cooperate with territorial-level anti-firearms squads and counter-NBC terrorism squads. Additionally, there is the Japan Coast Guard, which guards territorial waters. The Coast Guard patrols the sea surrounding Japan and uses surveillance and control countermeasures against smuggling, marine environmental crime, poaching, piracy, spy ships, unauthorized foreign fishing vessels, and illegal immigration. The firearm and sword possession control law strictly regulates the civilian ownership of guns, swords and other weaponry. According to the United Nations Office on Drugs and Crime, among the member states of the UN that report statistics, the incidence rates of violent crimes such as murder, abduction, sexual violence and robbery are very low in Japan.
Economy.
Japan is the third largest national economy in the world, after the United States and China, in terms of nominal GDP, and the fourth largest national economy in the world, after the United States, China and India, In terms of purchasing power parity, Japan's public debt was estimated at around 230% of its annual gross domestic product. The largest of any rated nation, Japan's labor force consisted of some 67 million workers. Japan's exports amounted to 18.5% of GDP in 2018. Japan's main export markets were the United States 19.8% and China 19.1%. The Japanese variant of capitalism has many distinct features. Keiretsu enterprises are influential, and lifetime employment and seniority-based career advancement are relatively common in the Japanese work environment. Japan also has a large cooperative sector, with 3 of the 10 largest cooperatives in the world, including the largest consumer cooperative and the largest agricultural cooperative in the world. Japan ranks highly for competitiveness and economic freedom. It is ranked 6th in the Global Competitiveness Report for 2015 to 2016.
Agriculture and fishery.
The Japanese agricultural sector accounts for about 1.2% of the total country's GDP. Because of this lack of arable land, a system of terraces is used to farm in small areas. This results in one of the world's highest levels of crop yields per unit area, with an agricultural self-sufficiency rate of about 50%. Japan's small agricultural sector, however, is also highly subsidized and protected. There has been a growing concern about farming as farmers are aging with a difficult time finding successors. Japan ranked 7th in the world in tonnage of fish caught and captured 3,167,610 metric tons of fish in 2016, down from an annual average of 4 million tons over the previous decade. Japan maintains one of the world's largest fishing fleets and accounts for nearly 15% of the global catch. Japan has also sparked controversy by supporting commercial whaling
industry.
Japan has a large industrial capacity and is home to some of the largest and most technologically advanced producers of motor vehicles, machine tools, steel and non-ferrous metals, ships, chemical substances, textiles, and processed foods. The country's manufacturing output is the 3rd highest in the world. Japan is the 3rd largest automobile producer in the world and is home to Toyota, the world's largest automobile company. The Japanese shipbuilding industry faces competition from South Korea and China. A 2020 government initiative identified this sector as a target for increasing exports.
Services and tourism.
Japan's service sector accounts for about 70% of its total economic output. Banking, retail, transportation, and telecommunications are all major industries, with companies such as Toyota, Mitsubishi UFJ, NTT, ION, SoftBank, Hitachi, and Itochu listed as some of the largest in the world. Japan attracted 31.9 million international tourists in 2019. For inbound tourism, Japan was ranked 11th in the world in 2019. The 2017 Travel and Tourism Competitiveness Report ranked Japan 4th out of 141 countries overall, which was the highest in Asia.
Science and technology.
Japan is a leading nation in scientific research, particularly in the natural sciences and engineering. The country ranks 12th among the most innovative countries in the Bloomberg Innovation Index. Relative to gross domestic product, Japan's research and development budget is the 2nd highest in the world, with 867,000 researchers sharing a 19 trillion yen research and development budget, which the country has produced 22 Nobel laureates in either physics, chemistry or medicine and 3 fields medalists. Japan leads the world in robotics production and use, supplying 55% of the world's 2017 total. Japan has the 2nd highest number of researchers in science and technology per capita in the world with 14 per 1,000 employees. The Japanese consumer electronics industry, once considered the strongest in the world, is in a state of decline as competition rises in countries like South Korea and China. However, video gaming in Japan remains a major industry. In 2014, Japan's consumer video game market grossed $9.6 billion, with $5.8 billion coming from mobile gaming. The Japan Aerospace Exploration Agency is Japan's national space agency. It conducts space, planetary, and aviation research, and leads development of rockets and satellites. It is a participant in the International Space Station. The Japanese experiment module Kaibo was added to the station during Space Shuttle assembly flights in 2008. The space probe Akatsuki was launched in 2010 and achieved orbit around Venus in 2015. Japan's plans in space exploration include building a moon base and landing astronauts by 2030. In 2007, it launched Lunar Explorer Selene Selenological and Engineering Explorer from Nagoya Space Center. The largest lunar mission since the Apollo program, its purpose was to gather data on the Moon's origin and evolution. The Explorer entered a lunar orbit on October 4, 2007, and was deliberately crashed into the Moon on June 11, 2009.
Infrastructure, transportation.
Japan has invested heavily in transportation infrastructure. The country has approximately of roads made up of city, town and village roads, of prefectural roads, of general national highways and of national expressways. Since privatization in 1987, dozens of Japanese railway companies compete in regional and local passenger transportation markets. Major companies include 7 Junior Enterprises, Kintetsu, Cebu Railway and Keio Corporation. The high-speed Shinkansen bullet trains that connect major cities are known for their safety and punctuality. There are 175 airports in Japan. The Keihin and Hanshin superport hubs are among the largest in the world, at 7.98 and 5.22 million respectively.
Energy.
39% of energy in Japan was produced from petroleum, 25% from coal, 23% from natural gas, 3.5% from hydropower and 1.5% from nuclear power. Nuclear power was down from 11.2% in 2010. By May 2012, all of the country's nuclear power plants had been taken offline because of ongoing public opposition following the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear disaster in March 2011, though government officials continued to try to sway public opinion in favor of returning at least some to service. The Sendai nuclear power plant restarted in 2015. And since then several other nuclear power plants have been restarted. Japan lacks significant domestic reserves and so has a heavy dependence on imported energy. The country has therefore aimed to diversify its sources and maintain high levels of energy efficiency.
Water supply and sanitation.
Responsibility for the water and sanitation sector is shared between the Ministry of Health, Labor and Welfare, in charge of water supply for domestic use, the Ministry of Land, Infrastructure, Transport and Tourism, in charge of water resources development as well as sanitation, the Ministry of the Environment, in charge of ambient water quality and environmental preservation, and the Ministry of Internal Affairs and Communications, in charge of performance benchmarking of utilities. Access to an improved water source is universal in Japan. About 98% of the population receives piped water supply from public utilities.
Demographics.
Japan has a population of 126.3 million, of which 124.8 million are Japanese nationals. 2019. In 2019, 92% of the total Japanese population lived in cities. The capital city Tokyo has a population of 13.8 million 2018. It is part of the Greater Tokyo Area, the biggest metropolitan area in the world with 38,140,000 people 2016. Japan's population is 98.1% ethnic Japanese, with small populations of foreign workers. Primary minority groups include the indigenous Ainu and Ryukyuan people, as well as social minority groups like the Burakumin, Zainichi Koreans, Chinese, Filipinos, Brazilians mostly of Japanese descent, and Peruvians mostly of Japanese descent are among the small minority groups in Japan. Japan has the second longest overall life expectancy at birth of any country in the world, at 84 years. The Japanese population is rapidly aging as a result of a post-World War II baby boom followed by a decrease in birth rates. As of 2019, over 20% of the population is over 65, and this is projected to rise to 1 in 3 by 2030. The changes in demographic structure have created a number of social issues, particularly a decline in workforce population and increase in the cost of social security benefits. Japan's population is expected to drop to around 100 million by 2050. Immigration and birth incentives are sometimes suggested as a solution to provide younger workers to support the nation's aging population. On April 1, 2019, Japan's revised immigration law was enacted, protecting the rights of foreign workers to help reduce labor shortages in certain sectors.
Religion.
Japan's constitution guarantees full religious freedom. Upper estimates suggest that 84 to 96% of the Japanese population subscribe to Shinto as its indigenous religion. However, these estimates are based on people affiliated with a temple, rather than the number of true believers. Many Japanese people practice both Shinto and Buddhism. They can either identify with both religions or describe themselves as non-religious or spiritual. The level of participation in religious ceremonies as a cultural tradition remains high, especially during festivals and occasions such as the first shrine visit of the new year. Taoism and Confucianism from China have also influenced Japanese beliefs and customs. Christianity was first introduced into Japan by Jesuit missions starting in 1549. Today, 1% to 1.5% of the population are Christians. Throughout the latest century, some Western customs originally related to Christianity including Western-style weddings, Valentine's Day and Christmas have become popular as secular customs among many Japanese. About 90% of those practicing Islam in Japan are foreign-born migrants. There were an estimated 105 mosques and 200,000 Muslims in Japan, 43,000 of which were ethnically Japanese. Other minority religions include Hinduism, Judaism, and Baha'i faith, as well as the animist beliefs of the Ainu.
Languages.
More than 99% of the population speaks Japanese as their first language. English instruction was made mandatory in Japanese elementary schools in 2020. Besides Japanese, the Ryukyuan languages Amami, Kunigami, Okinawan, Mako, Yaeyama, Yonaguni, also part of the Japonic language family, are spoken in the Ryukyu Islands chain. Few children learn these languages, but local governments have sought to increase awareness of the traditional languages. The Ainu language, which is a language isolate, is moribund, with only a few native speakers remaining.
Education.
Primary schools, secondary schools and universities were introduced in 1872 as a result of the Meiji Restoration. Since the 1947 Fundamental Law of Education, compulsory education in Japan comprises elementary and junior high school, which together last for 9 years. Almost all children continue their education at a 3-year senior high school. The two top-ranking universities in Japan are the University of Tokyo and Kyoto University. Starting in April 2016, various schools began the academic year with elementary school and junior high school integrated into one 9-year compulsory schooling program. Next plans for this approach to be adopted nationwide. The program for international student assessment coordinated by the ECT ranks the overall knowledge and skills of Japanese 15-year-olds as the third best in the world. Japan is one of the top-performing ECT countries in reading literacy, Math and Sciences, with the average student scoring 529, and has one of the world's highest educated labor forces among ECT countries. Japan's public spending on education amounted to just 3% of its GDP, below the ECT average of 4.9%. In 2017, the country ranked third for the percentage of 25 to 64-year-olds that have attained tertiary education, with 51%. In addition, 64% Japanese aged 25 to 34 have some form of tertiary education qualification, and bachelor's degrees are held by 34% of Japanese aged 25 to 64, the second most in the ECT after South Korea. Since 1973, all elderly persons have been covered by government-sponsored insurance. Japan has one of the world's highest suicide rates. Another significant public health issue is smoking among Japanese men. Japan has the lowest rate of heart disease in the ECT, and the lowest level of dementia in the developed world.
Culture.
Contemporary Japanese culture combines influences from Asia, Europe and North America. Traditional Japanese arts include crafts such as ceramics, textiles, lacquerware, swords and dolls, performances of bunraku, kabuki, no dance, and rakugo, and other practices, the tea ceremony, ikebana, martial arts, calligraphy, origami, onsen, geisha and games. Japan has a developed system for the protection and promotion of both tangible and intangible cultural properties and national treasures. 22 sites have been inscribed on the UNESCO World Heritage List, 18 of which are of cultural significance. The interaction between Japanese and European art has been significant. For example, ukiyo-e prints, which began to be exported in the 19th century in the movement known as Japanism, had a significant influence on the development of modern art in the West, most notably on post-impressionism. Japanese architecture is a combination between local and other influences. It has traditionally been typified by wooden or mud plaster structures, elevated slightly off the ground, with tiled or thatched roofs. The shrines of eyes have been celebrated as the prototype of Japanese architecture. Traditional housing in many temple buildings see the use of tatami mats and sliding doors that break down the distinction between rooms and indoor and outdoor space. Since the 19th century, however, Japan has incorporated much of Western modern architecture into construction and design. However, it was not until after World War II that Japanese architects made an impression on the international scene, firstly with the work of architects like Kenzo Tange and then with movements like metabolism.
Literature and philosophy.
The earliest works of Japanese literature include the Kojiki and Nihon Shoki Chronicles and the Manyoshu Poetry Anthology, all from the 8th century and written in Chinese characters. In the early Heian period, the system of phonograms known as kana, hiragana and katakana was developed. The tale of the bamboo cutter is considered the oldest extant Japanese narrative. An account of court life is given in the Pillow Book by Shonagon, while the tale of Genji by Murasaki Shikibu is often described as the world's first novel. During the Edo period, the Junin townspeople overtook the samurai aristocracy as producers and consumers of literature. The popularity of the works of Seikaku, for example, reveals this change in readership and authorship, while Basho revivified the poetic tradition of the Kokinshu with his Heikai haiku and wrote the poetic travelogue Okuno Hozomiki. The Meiji era saw the decline of traditional literary forms as Japanese literature integrated Western influences. Natsume Soseki and Morio Gai were significant novelists in the early 20th century, followed by Runosuke Akutagawa, Junichiro Tanizaki, Kafunagai and, more recently, Haruki Murakami and Kenji Nakagami. Japan has two Nobel Prize-winning authors, Yasunari Kawabata 1968 and Kenzaburo 1994. Japanese philosophy has historically been a fusion of both foreign, particularly Chinese and Western, and uniquely Japanese elements. In its literary forms, Japanese philosophy began about 14 centuries ago. Confucian ideals are still evident today in the Japanese concept of society and the self, and in the organization of the government and the structure of society. Buddhism has profoundly impacted Japanese psychology, metaphysics, and aesthetics.
Performing arts.
Japanese music is eclectic and diverse. Many instruments, such as the koto, were introduced in the 9th and 10th centuries. The popular folk music, with the guitar-like shamisen, dates from the 16th century. Western classical music, introduced in the late 19th century, forms an integral part of Japanese culture. Kumi-daiko ensemble drumming was developed in post-war Japan and became very popular in North America. Popular music in post-war Japan has been heavily influenced by American and European trends, which has led to the evolution of J-pop. Karaoke is a significant cultural activity. The 4 traditional theaters from Japan are Kyujin, Kabuki, and Bunraku. No is one of the oldest continuous theater traditions in the world.
Customs and holidays
Is a Japanese idiom which denotes a form of interpersonal communication through unspoken mutual understanding. Is a virtue of the capability of accepting death with composure. Cherry blossoms are a symbol of Isagyozu in the sense of embracing the transience of the world. Is a central idea in Japanese culture, meaning to acknowledge one's own mistake and to pledge improvement. Refers to the Japanese belief that mystical powers dwell in words and names. Officially, Japan has 16 national, government-recognized holidays. Public holidays in Japan are regulated by the of 1948. Beginning in 2000, Japan implemented the Happy Monday system, which moved a number of national holidays to Monday in order to obtain a long weekend. The national holidays in Japan are New Year's Day on January 1st, Coming of Age Day on the second Monday of January, National Foundation Day on February 11th, the Emperor's Birthday on February 23rd, Vernal Equinox Day on March 20th or 21, Showa Day on April 29th, Constitution Memorial Day on May 3rd, Greenery Day on May 4th, Children's Day on May 5th, Marine Day on the third Monday of July, Mountain Day on August 11th, Respect for the Aged Day on the third Monday of September, Autumnal Equinox on September 23rd or 24, Health and Sports Day on the second Monday of October, Culture Day on November 3rd, and Labor Thanksgiving Day on November 23rd.
Cuisine.
Japanese cuisine offers a vast array of regional specialties that use traditional recipes and local ingredients. Seafood and Japanese rice or noodles are traditional staples. Japanese curry, since its introduction to Japan from British India, is so widely consumed that it can be termed a national dish. Alongside Ramen and Year equals 2015 Publisher equals Oxford University Presses equals 978 019 931,339 6 pages equals 777. Ingredients such as red bean paste and mochi are used. More modern-day tastes includes Year equals 2008 Publisher equals Libraries Unlimited ISN equals 978 159,158 488 9 pages equals 148 Popular Japanese beverages include Year equals 2014 Publisher equals Academic Press ISN equals 978 012. 2015 NHK survey on television viewing in Japan, 79% of Japanese watch television daily. Japanese television dramas are viewed both within Japan and internationally. Other popular shows are in the genres of variety shows, comedy, and news programs. Japanese newspapers are among the most circulated in the world. Japan has one of the oldest and largest film industries globally. Ishiro Honda's Godzilla became an international icon of Japan and spawned an entire subgenre of kaiju films, as well as the longest-running film franchise in history. Japanese animated films and television series, known as anime, were largely influenced by Japanese manga and have been extensively popular in the West. Japan is a world-renowned powerhouse of animation.
Sports.
Traditionally, sumo is considered Japan's national sport. Japanese martial arts such as judo and kendo are taught as part of the compulsory junior high school curriculum. Baseball is the most popular spectator sport in the country. Japan's top professional league, Nippon Professional Baseball, was established in 1936. Since the establishment of the Japan Professional Football League in 1992, association football has also gained a wide following. The country co-hosted the 2002 FIFA World Cup with South Korea. Japan has one of the most successful football teams in Asia, winning the Asian Cup 4 times, and the FIFA Women's World Cup in 2011. Golf is also popular in Japan. Japan has significant involvement in motorsport. Japanese automotive manufacturers have been successful in multiple different categories, with titles and victories in series such as Formula 1, MotoGP, IndyCar, World Rally Championship, World Endurance Championship, World Touring Car Championship, British Touring Car Championship and the IMSA Sports Car Championship. 3 Japanese drivers have achieved podium finishes in Formula 1, and drivers from Japan also have victories at the Indianapolis 500 and the 24 Hours of Le Mans, in addition to success in domestic championships. Super GT is the most popular national series in Japan, while Super Formula is the top-level domestic open-wheel series. The country also hosts major races such as the Japanese Grand Prix. Japan hosted the Summer Olympics in Tokyo in 1964 and the Winter Olympics in Sapporo in 1972 and Nagano in 1998. Further, the country hosted the official 2006 Basketball World Championship and will co-host the 2023 Basketball World Championship. Tokyo will host the 2020 Summer Olympics, making Tokyo the first Asian city to host the Olympics twice. The country gained the hosting rights for the official Women's Volleyball World Championship on 5 occasions, more than any other nation. Japan is the most successful Asian rugby union country and hosted the 2019 IRB